Good afternoon, live from Toronto and the GBKM network. This is the Chatt Up Show, the show where we chat about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aloyde, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch live, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV, and you can follow us on Instagram at GBKMFM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. And I want to say a big thank you to our official Chatt Up Show sponsors, Coded Signature, that's coded with a K. It's a Nigerian-owned local brand when using the code GBKM. Again, you can get 10% at checkout when using the code GBKM, and they ship worldwide, so you don't even have to worry about location. You can get yourself some cool shirts, cool hats, all of that fun stuff at codedsignature.com or on their Facebook. You can check out their Facebook or Instagram as well at Coded Signature. So thank you again, Coded Signature, for sponsoring the Chatt Up Show. Now, it's a new week, which means that there's more news to talk about. And of course, it wouldn't be the Chatt Up Show if we didn't begin talking about something to do with the pandemic, something to do with COVID-19. Now, again, I'm back here again to let you know that Toronto, we really need to get it together. Cases are rising a lot more and has forced the government now to reduce the amount of people we're allowed to socialize with at unauthorized gatherings. So we actually went from 50 people allowed indoors to now 10, and from 100 people outdoors to maybe for the holiday season. If we continue in the pattern that we're going right now, it's definitely going to look like holidays are going to be very toned down this year, to say the least. So if you're thinking about how you might want to plan your Thanksgiving dinner this year, or planning on hosting, or if you've been invited to a Thanksgiving gathering and you're like, I don't know what to do, I'm not sure, don't worry, we've got you covered. Later on in the show, we'll be giving some CDC tips and some, industry tips on how to host a safe yet thankful dinner and to give thanks for people you love. So stay tuned for that. But first, some quick pop culture news. This past weekend, Hollywood celebrated the first virtual, but the 72nd annual Emmy Awards, which we know gives a shout out and accolades to those who are doing great stuff in TV and movies. Now, one thing the award ceremony was praised for this year especially is, of course, diversity. This is a conversation that we've been having for a very long time about award shows not being diverse enough in the categories and not, picking up maybe indie shows and movies, not picking up people of color as much for nominations. But this year was a record or history-making year for the Emmys, as over 30 people of color were nominated in various categories, but it was also just a reflection of TV nowadays. I mean, we're starting to see a lot more diversity in what we're seeing on screen, who we're seeing on screen, the stories that are being told as well. So if we're seeing more of that on our screens, in our TV shows, in our movies, then it's hopefully going to reflect a little bit more at these award shows. It's not just centered around one idea of what can tell a story. We're seeing so many different varying, diverse, if you will, storytelling that's going on right now. So it's a hopeful time. It's a very hopeful time for the future of award shows and ceremonies. Now, one thing that really made history was Canada's owned and filmed in Ontario, Schitt's Creek, which won a record-breaking of all 9 Emmys in the comedy category, which is the first time any show or movie has done this in the history of the Emmys, actually in 1 year alone. So that's amazing. I mean, I have been a watcher of the show for a while, and I've always put it on my bucket list to take a little tour to see where they filmed all over Ontario, the different locations. And I actually found out that you can go and check out these different locations too if you're a fan of Schitt's Creek as well. The motel that the Rose family actually lives in and works or owns, I guess, is about a 2-hour drive outside of downtown Toronto. So if you're looking for maybe a little road trip over the long weekend, you want to skip out on Thanksgiving plans in a few weeks, maybe you want to take a little road trip to these little spots around the province, safely, of course. You can go check out the motel. It's only about 2 hours outside of Toronto. So that is a great little road trip idea. Now, another thing that actually broke some Emmy records, if you will, broke history, was the fact that the first time the youngest person to win a leading actress Emmy, Zendaya, who at 24 years old, Zendaya was in the category with Jennifer Aniston who was in The Morning Show. She was also in the category with Sandra Oh, who's on Killing Eve, who was also nominated in the same category. Now, we obviously know Jennifer Aniston is playing Rachel on Friends, loved her, maybe hated to love watching the Brangelina situation and Jen situation unfold, had much love for Jennifer Aniston, of course, a veteran in the art of TV and acting, if you will. Sandra Oh, who also stole our hearts in Grey's Anatomy as Christina Yang, Dr. Christina Yang. So it was kind of like wow, it's refreshing to see someone who is so young but is receiving the recognition. Now, Zendaya won the Emmy for her role as Rue on the HBO hit series Euphoria, which basically tells stories of teenage addiction, if you will. So very hard-hitting themes. And for as long as she's played this character, she's received a lot of recognition for the work that she's doing as the character Rue, bringing it to life and putting it on the screens for those of us to enjoy. So this was a big moment for her, especially being the youngest actress in history to win this award at just 24 years old. It means something, it says a lot, and also to be a Black woman, to see where she's come from as well, starting off on Disney Channel, and to see that she's slowly rising. I mean, she played the role of MJ in Spider-Man, for those of you who follow the Marvel Universe films. So that was a major role as well that she was able to take on. And I personally think that she brings a new flavor to the character that is normally known as Mary Jane, but now in this version of Spider-Man, she goes by Michelle. But yeah, so this is just a history-making, I guess, Emmy celebration, the first virtual one. In Zendaya's speech, actually, she paid homage to the youth of the next generation. I guess we could kind of call her Hollywood's it girl right now, because she is everywhere, honestly. You hear Zendaya's name, you see her everywhere. She's starting to become her own woman, but also starting to carve her way in the industry, I would say. Now, in her speech at the virtual ceremony, she was surrounded by family, which was so beautiful to see. And she actually said, "I know this feels like a really weird time to be celebrating, but I just want to say there is hope in the young people out there. I know that our TV show doesn't always feel like a great example of that, but there is a hope in our young people, and I just want to say to all my peers out there doing the work in the streets, I see you, I admire you, I thank you." Now, I guess paying homage to those who are out protesting for justice, currently still protesting for justice, for those who have lost their lives to racial injustice and police brutality as well. A lot of people have been saying that there's really a lot of hope in the future generations, as they're really taking their lives into their own hands, and they're not expecting for change to just happen, that they really want to see it happen, and they're going about making that change happen. So it's really inspiring to see the future generations really knowing more about the world around them, maybe because it's the age of social media where things are shown constantly and are easily accessible nowadays. But there's something to be said about the future and the hope that we have in young generations who are essentially going to be the leaders of tomorrow, as we've always said. So why not build them up when we can now, to ensure that, passing off leadership to capable hands. Now, Zendaya wasn't the only person to pay tribute, if you will, to fighting the fight for justice and for change. Regina King, who we love at the Chatt Up Show, she was nominated as well for an Emmy, which she won, and she actually wore a shirt with Breonna Taylor's face on it. Now, as we know, Breonna Taylor lost her life in March when 3 Louisville officers entered her home on a no-knock warrant, and she was shot 8 times and lost her life that night. So this was Regina King's act of solidarity and even protest, if you will, to be on such a large platform as the Emmys and to opt not to, get dolled up and dressed to the nines, if you will, but instead take the time to really use the platform she has to talk about things that are pressing and important. I mean, we can't ignore this. Fighting for justice is always something that will take center stage. In her speech while she accepted her award for Outstanding Leading Actress in a Limited Drama Series, she urged folks to vote as the U.S. elections are fast approaching. Some states have even opened early voting registration and whatnot, early voting. So Regina King said, we've got to vote. I would be remiss not to mention that. Have a voting plan, vote up the ballot. Please go to ballotpedia.com and find out more. Find out who you're voting for in the municipal elections. It is very important. Be a good human. So she took the time to, say thank you, of course, to all those she worked with, but also to remind people that it's very important to exercise their rights to vote, especially the young generations who, historically may not have been at the polls as much in previous years, but now it's the time that if we really want change to happen, of course, the necessary step to take is to go out and vote and to exercise one's right to vote. And that's across the board, everywhere, not just for the US. Everyone should be exercising their rights to vote because it is a right that a lot of us have been given that sometimes maybe we don't appreciate the opportunity to, have that opportunity to pick who we want to represent us and pick who we feel would make the necessary change that need to happen within our societies. Now, Regina King also paid her respect to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away recently. Just hoping that she rests in peace as someone who has been fighting for change throughout her career. Just a lot of conversations about what needs to change has been really at the forefront of a lot of just conversations in general, really. Now we're really talking about what we want to see in the future, what we need to see in the future, and how we're going to make that happen. And it's an inspiring time, though it has been a little bleak at times, but it's still inspiring to see that people are still so focused on advocating for change. Now, Uzo Aduba, who actually won an Emmy for her portrayal as 1972 U.S. presidential candidate Shirley Chisholm in Mrs. America, Uzo Aduba opted for a more casual look for the Emmys this year, just wearing a simple black shirt with just Breonna Taylor's name on the front, and that was it. And that in itself speaks a statement. But then it's also bringing up the conversation that is this really a fight for justice, or is this another way that we're gonna create just an image that doesn't really go anywhere towards making any changes? We've had this conversation on the Chatt Up Show before when Breonna Taylor, an image of Breonna Taylor graced the covers of Vanity Fair's September issue. We're in September now. But just, again, things that people are thinking about, especially now that it has been announced that Breonna Taylor's family was awarded a $12 million settlement from the city of Louisville. Now, folks still feel that, of course, just giving the family money is not enough to fight for justice and to seek justice for Breonna Taylor. And in the name of Breonna Taylor, actress Kerry Washington, who's known for her role as Olivia Pope in the hit TV show Scandal, and also just a little throwback, she actually played the role of Idi Amin's wife in The Last King of Scotland. If anyone actually remembers that movie, tapped into my throwback memory chamber in my brain. But Kerry Washington actually tweeted and has been advocating for Breonna Taylor's case a lot recently. She tweeted, "A settlement was reached, but justice was not served. Arrest the officers who killed Breonna Taylor." So essentially just echoing the sentiment of a lot of folks who feel that just because you're giving over money doesn't mean that real justice has been sought after, and that no justice has been found. There was no resolution, really, if the people who were involved aren't facing the consequences to the full extent of the law. Now, Tamika Palmer, who is Breonna Taylor's mother, also told press, quote, "As significant as today is, it's only the beginning of getting full justice for Breonna. We must not lose focus on what the real drive is. And with that being said, it's time to move forward with the criminal charges because she deserves that and much more." Now, as of today, it has been 194 days since her passing, since her death. And, it's, I think at the back of a lot of people's minds, it's a case that we've been following since it really blew up once the protesting began. But it's something that a lot of people, it's hit home to a lot of folks, especially people who heard of stories about Breonna and how she was with her community and who she was and what she meant to those who really loved her. It's stinging a little that it's taken this long for actual justice to be found and, the law to take action in this case. But it's the little steps moving forward, as Tamika Palmer said, that it's continuing the drive to move forward to make change and to actually continue on with criminal charges. Now we will see what will unfold, if there will be a case, a trial, if you will, for this case, and see what happens in the future. But for now, the family has been awarded $12 million from the city of Louisville. Now, of course, this isn't the first time people have used their platform at awards or speeches to speak about issues in society, to talk about injustices that folks are facing. But it seems that now this conversation is so centered around the same thing, wanting change and wanting to see justice, even just across the globe in general. And it just, something feels different right now about the conversations we're having around what changes need to happen, even just around past injustices, the history of injustice in certain places, and how we're going to move forward as society and as communities, living and operating within these spaces that have often shut folks out. I would say that it's a special shift now that we're seeing more and more young people really rise up to stand, working in the streets, just continuing protest, taking it upon themselves to figure out how to make justice. I mean, we saw it with the Parkland shooting, that students came together and fought to create some amendments and to push a bill to ensure that more students in the future are safer in schools and on school premises. We're seeing more young folks really rise up and be like, listen, like, adults aren't just going to tell us what to do. Like, this is our world as well, and we have every right to speak up against what we feel is not right and what we feel is unfair. And that in itself is hopeful. And as Zendaya says, there's so much hope right now for the future generations. And we see you, we thank you, and we admire you for the work that you're doing, because it's not easy. I know how old like when I was in high school, the last thing I was thinking about was planning a protest or going to a protest. I was probably thinking about prom, honestly, or graduating high school, getting to college. But, there are a lot of young people who are really making it their life's mission and purpose to really fight for change in this world. And it's great to see that so many more people are on board with these discussions that are happening and with wanting to be the change they want to see in the world instead of waiting for it to happen. So again, it's nothing new, but it is also new to see more celebrities on the ground, out there fighting in the fields, if you will, fighting in the trenches, to go with that cliche or that saying. They're out there in the streets protesting as well, receiving similar treatment from police officers too, being hit with batons, tear gas, hit with the rubber pellets as well, some even being arrested because they're out there protesting for justice. And it's maybe, again, the age of social media is really inspiring a lot more people, and it's a lot more in your face, Before, you could just turn off the news and that was it. You could shut your eyes, I guess, to the world around you. But now it follows you everywhere you go. So you can't really shut your eyes anymore. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people really joining in the fight and really speaking up as well. Because when you speak up, change really does happen. We've seen it in the past. We're seeing it now. And so that's just something that, a little takeaway from this year's Emmys, just seeing that, when people did speak up about the lack of diversity at these award shows, they spoke up about the lack of representation behind the scenes, on the screens, on TV and movies. We're starting to see those shifts, maybe slowly for some others, but honestly, they are happening. There are strides being taken to ensure that there's equal opportunity for all, and there's just, the world is so diverse, so why can't we see that on our screens? Why can't we see that at the award shows? Why can't we see that at the festivals? And it's slowly happening. The more we talk about it, the more people are waking up and realizing the importance of this change. And that, for one, is a little bit of inspiring news. Now, we are going to take a quick break, but when we're back, going to be discussing something that is close to many people's hearts, and that was the passing of NBA legend Kobe Bryant and the following lawsuits that have happened post his and his daughter's death in the helicopter crash that happened towards the end of January this year. So stay tuned.
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alone. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorized to keep you from evil theology. For you, the darker hue, you're denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Hello, welcome back to the Chatt Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lloydie, and we've just kind of been talking about the Emmys and what's happening with that and how there are so many record-breaking awards this year. Zendaya being the youngest person to receive awards in a category, Schitt's Creek taking away 9 Emmys, sweeping the comedy category this year, which was a history-making moment for the Emmys and for the show as well, I'm sure. But now today, our focus topic, if you will, is about the lawsuit that Vanessa Bryant is filing against the LA Sheriff Department. Now, just taking a step back to look at where we were in the world at the beginning of the year and this tragedy that occurred, almost foreshadowing future tragedies that would happen in 2020. But it was the death of NBA legend Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter and 7 other passengers and a pilot in a helicopter crash that happened at the end of January this year. Now, it's been about 8 months since the crash when the passengers were on their way to a basketball tournament. And for a lot of us, the news broke via TMZ, which was a shock. A lot of people didn't want to believe it. I mean, I remember where I was. I knew that I didn't think it was real until I saw more reports surfacing about this breaking news, essentially. And it was, of course, it was a shock. It was not unexpected. We wouldn't have expected such news about Kobe Bryant. You know, this is someone that so many people had looked up to for so long, and he was doing so much good in the world and wanting to give back as much as he could. And to hear this shocking news was really devastating to a lot of people, but mainly to his family and especially to his wife, Vanessa Bryant, who actually had to learn of her husband's death and her daughter's death through news and social media, essentially, and people sharing the graphic images of the crash scene. And for that, of the sharing these graphic images, she has filed a lawsuit against the Los Angeles deputies, claiming that deputies shared unauthorized photos of the crash. Now, according to the lawsuit, Vanessa Bryant was, quote, shocked and devastated to see reports of the graphic images, specifically citing that she had learned of the photo leak from a Los Angeles Times article in February. So let's just unpack that for a second, because TMZ broke this news without confirming if the family had been informed by the law enforcement officials. So there are people, you know, assuming people are blowing up her phone, texting, calling, trying to figure out if it's true or not. And she's still in a daze because she's not really sure what's going on, hasn't been giving a lot of information, only to then find out later that images from the scene, from people who had authority to be at the crash site, but should not have been sharing the images in social settings outside of the investigation of the crash, were doing so. And now, you know, everyone has a hold of these rather graphic images of what happened to people who were very close to her that she loved dearly. Now, she had actually then requested information from the department about its investigation and details on what had happened or what they had done to ensure that this wouldn't happen, to ensure that the leaks didn't come from them, just, you know, to figure out what was going on her end. And I mean, you can imagine how she felt seeing those images. She wanted to know why they were shared the way they were. Now, according to the lawsuit and a statement from Vanessa Bryant's attorney, Louis Lee, said that this lawsuit is about accountability and about preventing this disgraceful behavior from happening to other families in the future who have suffered loss. They went on to say that the department formally refused Mrs. Bryant's request for information, saying it was unable to assist with any inquiry and had no legal obligation to do so. It's now essentially, as Lewis Lee said, for a court to tell the department what its obligations are. So the department essentially said, sorry, it's out of our hands, can't do anything about it, can't really tell you much about it. Now, Sheriff Alexander Villanueva previously told news media that 8 deputies took or shared graphic photos of the scene, and he had in fact ordered the images deleted. The sheriff said the department has a policy against taking and sharing crime scene photos, but it does not apply to accident scenes, which, I mean, thinking of that, it makes sense that if it's an accident, you know, it's not as sensitive maybe as a crime scene that is still under investigation, but it's still a sensitive topic. People still lost their lives. And it's not just people, it's people who are very well known in the community, in the world, in society in general. So this was something that, you know, just from the outside looking in, should maybe been handled with a little bit more discretion, if you will, on what needed to be shared and when it should have been shared. And that's just across the board, from when the news was breaking to these images being leaked as well. Now, when he had ordered these images deleted, it seemed a little too late, because according to Bryant's lawyers, the photos were shared and mentioned outside of the investigation, and at one point was shared in a bar, where, according to the lawsuit that was filed, a bartender had actually overheard a trainee deputy use his photos to brag and try to impress a woman. And the bartender filed a written complaint with the sheriff's department, the lawsuit states, saying that this isn't supposed to be happening. This person who is supposed to be acting in the utmost professionalism is out here bragging about the images of a very sensitive subject in public outside of their professional grounds. Now, the lawsuit calls the department's investigation a cover-up, and says that the sheriff directed deputies to delete the photos to avoid discipline and to destroy evidence of their misconduct. This is according to the lawsuit. So essentially calling them out for their bad behavior, if you will. Now, of course, besides the stress of losing her husband and her daughter at the same time, the claim in the lawsuit says that Bryant is sickened by the thought of strangers looking at the photos. She also dreads the thought that her children might stumble upon the pictures online later. Which, as a mother, I mean, I'm sure she would want to protect her kids as much as possible from having to relive that experience over and over. And in the day of social media, it's so easy to take one picture and share it so many times. I mean, images of those crashes, if you just Google it, you'll probably find the images of the crash, and you'll see them for yourself. So it's hard, you know, as much as you want to protect them, to do that, especially when it's so easy to share so quickly. But back to just working professionally, there was no business anyone should have been sharing it in a bar to, quote unquote, supposedly or allegedly be trying to impress someone with images of a helicopter crash that took the lives of 9 people. Like, even if you're trying to be cool, like, that just seems a little distasteful, wrong, just doesn't feel right, ethically speaking. I mean, I don't know about legally at this point, but ethically speaking, it just doesn't seem like the right thing to do, especially when you have the authority to be there and you have the authority to know what's going on, the ins and outs of the investigation. It just seems, especially when it's with such a celebrity. I mean, everyone across the globe knows Kobe Bryant's name. His name still has lasting standing effects now, and even just people respect his name even now, post his death. So to be sharing these images, I get it, you know, like, hey, check it out, I was there, this is what I saw, but then also just working with a little bit of discretion in that area. Now, of course, accident scenes images are reported and used in the media, but due to the celebrity factor, it just seems that one would expect a little bit more privacy and a little bit more of a heads up to those involved as well. And again, because of the celebrity factor, it led to the treatment of something as sensitive as the passing of a loved athlete, businessman, you know, Academy Award winner, had an Oscar, a father, a husband, a girl dad. Everyone's going to pick it up because this is someone that so many people have loved and looked up to. It's going to be picked up quickly and shared quickly. It's going to go viral quickly, just as the news breaking went viral so quickly. And I'm sure TMZ got a lot of the clicks to the website that they were hoping for. Now, Vanessa Bryant has also filed a wrongful death suit against the Island Express and the pilot, Ara Zobian, who helicopter pilot, were named in Bryant's original complaint filed earlier this year. But now in the latest filing, lawyers for Bryant say OC Helicopters owner Richard Webb, who regularly discussed weather and routes with Island Express on that day, before and during the flights, were also now named in this new wrongful death suit. Now, there were a lot of folks that felt that this news was mishandled by a lot of people, especially people who were expressing their dislike, if you will, for TMZ, who originally broke the news of Kobe Bryant's death. Now, TMZ was actually scolded by the sheriffs, if some of us remembered, during a press conference, who called out the site, saying that it would be extremely disrespectful to understand that your loved one perished and you learned about it from TMZ. That is just wholly inappropriate. And then Los Angeles County Undersheriff Tim Murakami said later on the Sunday that he was also saddened that I was gathering facts as a media outlet reported that Kobe had passed. I understand getting the scoop, but please allow us time to make personal notifications to their loved ones. It's very cold to hear of the loss via media. Breaks my heart, he tweeted. And it broke a lot of people's hearts. A lot of folks shared their dislike for TMZ for breaking the news without knowing whether Kobe Bryant and Gigi Bryant and the families of those who had lost their loved ones in the crash were even notified. It was just, we got breaking news, let's go with it, let's run with it, and there wasn't much regard. So many people actually were so upset about it that a petition was created petitioning which was created on change.org, petitioning Fox television stations and Warner Media, who are essentially the parent companies for TMZ and the platform that TMZ is featured on, urging them to take down TMZ as a whole platform. And to date, actually, it's received 615,713 signatures. So 615,000 people said get rid of TMZ because they are no good and they had no business sharing that news the way they did, without being at least somewhat respectful to Vanessa Bryant and her family and the family of those whose loved ones also died in that crash. It was last updated about 4 days after the news broke that TMZ's founder, Harvey Levin, said that he was in communication with Kobe Bryant's representatives before publishing the story. However, he also acknowledges that the families of other victims could have found out from TMZ's reporting or social media, which happened more than 4 hours before the official announcement was made. I mean, this is also a conversation of when is it too soon to share a story. I mean, as you know, being in the media, you want to be the first one in to tell a story, you know, breaking news. You want to be one of the first ones to share what's happening in the world before anyone else really, I guess, gets the chance to. But then there's also the ethics of it all. No family member wants to hear about their loved ones losing their lives in the media before they get a chance to hear of the news from the officials who are involved in, you know, sharing that news. It's not a great way. It's daunting, especially when you're in a position as Vanessa Bryant is, you know, famous, a celebrity, folks know you. People feel inclined to, you know, send messages and send their love, of course, but it can be very overwhelming if you don't even know what's going on. And everyone else knows about it except for you, the person who should know about it first. It can be really hard to deal with. So, I mean, as media myself, you know, this is a time we can call out media and be like, hey, let's not forget our ethics, even though, you know, you're trying to be the first one on the scene, the first one to break a story. It's understandable. But at the same time, these are real people and human lives that were lost. And it's humans that are having to deal with this grief as well. They have feelings, and they also need to be respected in how we deal with such sensitive news and sensitive topics. I mean, death is not something light, and a lot of people do take a while to get through it. And to have it constantly thrown in your face because you're in the public eye doesn't necessarily make the grieving process any easier than if you could do it in private, essentially. And now it was made essentially a public thing that Vanessa had to put out, you know, her own statement about what had happened after everyone had already learned about it all. It just felt that the time that she needed to deal with the news before it became global was not afforded her, and it just seems a little unfair, personally speaking. I mean, you know, Kobe Bryant's name is very well known till this day, and any news about him would blow up. But his death and his daughter's death without knowing if the family has or has not been notified about the crash just doesn't seem very, it's rather distasteful, it feels. And, you know, as I said, as part of the media, it's easy to fall into the, we need to get the story out there, we need to be breaking news, be the first to share a story. But again, remembering that these are humans with real lives and people's feelings as well involved. And this is someone that was so loved by so many people. You know, it's Kobe Bryant, there are kids growing up still shouting his name whenever they take a shot at even like a trash can trying to throw something in, or even on the court. People who looked up to him, looked up to his work as an athlete, his drive as an athlete, as a businessman, as someone who continue to work on themselves and continue to want to do good in the world. It wasn't easy for a lot of people, but especially for the families involved. I can't even imagine what they're going through. But now, Vanessa Bryant has filed this lawsuit against the LA Sheriff's Department about the sharing and the leaking of the graphic images, which again, it just seems like there was a lot of the professionalism kind of went out the window for a second as people were, you know, shocked by the news of the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter, and those along in the crash with them as well. It is shocking news. I mean, there's still, till this day, his birthday was celebrated not too long ago as well, and folks were just remembering just the legend that he was and all that he did in his life on Earth. And it's also just a reminder that, you know, things change in a split second, and things basically did change after that happened. You know, the world kind of went into lockdown for a while, essentially, but just it took a moment for people to really deal with that and deal with the fact that this was someone who was lost, in the way that it was presented and how people found out. Just felt that enough respect was not given to the necessary parties who were personally and deeply affected by this loss and by this crash. And so we shall see where the lawsuit goes and what will come of it, but that's just a little update on what's going on in some pop culture stuff. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is almost Thanksgiving. Holiday season is fast approaching. I don't even know where the time has gone. It's fall. It sure is. The leaves are changing outside. I'm seeing a lot more reds and oranges and yellows than I'm seeing a lot of greens, and leaves haven't necessarily started falling yet. I'm gonna hope that holds on for a little bit longer, but it's fast approaching. We're, you know, the year's winding down. It's time that we're thinking about spending time with family and loved ones again. And we are in unprecedented times, and things are a little different now because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So just a reminder, if maybe you've forgotten, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. It's still going on. We haven't fully flattened the curve. There's no cures we know of just yet. It's still something that we're gonna have to live with for a little bit longer. And I mean, for now, at least in Ontario, we know that our regulations and restrictions are still going to be up until at least Thanksgiving, because that's not that long away. I mean, Canadian Thanksgiving is like 2-3 weeks, if you will. And it's all just quickly approaching. So if you're feeling a little stressed about what you're going to do for like the holiday season, you're thinking about hosting, but you're not sure if it's safe enough to host people, we got you, don't worry. We scoured the CDC website and some other sites as well to give you some tips on how you can safely host your loved ones for this holiday season, just to, you know, spend some time, give thanks, love up on each other from a safe distance, of course. Now, as we know, in Ontario, we know that, as I mentioned, Thanksgiving is probably going to be a little different this year because of the regulations on how and limitations on how many people can gather at unauthorized gatherings, indoors and outdoors. We know that indoors it's 10 people maximum, and outdoors it's 25. Only 25 of you can come together outside in the fresh air. So let that just sink in a little bit, so that it also reminds us that there was a point when it was 50 indoors and 100 outdoors, and now we're back down again. It's like we're regressing. We don't want to keep going backwards. We want to move forward, and we want to keep doing what we can do to flatten the curve. But with that in mind, and holiday season approaching, that probably means that you're going to have to stick to a very strict guest list. So for those who love to bring an uninvited +1, did not RSVP with a +1, I'm so sorry. You might have to leave that +1 at home, or you're going to have to pick up the phone and call in advance to let the person that you are attending their gathering know that you are bringing a +1 just for safety. So, the necessary precautions can be taken if people need to find out about, contact tracing and whatnot, all of that stuff. It's easier when you know exactly who's going to be coming, how many people, and you can keep that regulated. So here is what the CDC suggests when it comes to Thanksgiving plans. Now, for one, you'll need to take in community levels of COVID-19. I mean, we know here in Toronto, it's probably the worst across the province. Toronto, pat on the hands, Toronto. So especially if you're planning on having out-of-towners coming to your gathering. So for those who are maybe planning on inviting their Torontonian family or loved ones to their gatherings, consider the case levels in Toronto and outside, or just anywhere you are, wherever they're coming from. Consider the levels there and consider where you are as well, just to kind of gauge on the chances. It's like if there are higher cases, the chances of someone coming in contact with someone who may have had COVID is a little higher than in places that have, less cases. Just basic maths, probability, all of that fun stuff. So if you are planning on having a gathering, just taking that into account, especially if you are planning to invite people who don't live in your community or with you or around you, close by, that you haven't been seeing or interacting with within your social circle. Remember, we had a social circle of only 10 people. Well, now I guess the easiest option is to just invite those 10 people that are already in your social circle for Thanksgiving. But yeah, so the first step is to just take that into account when you're making the guest list, where you're planning on having the gathering is important as well, which brings me to the next point. The location, which is important mainly because of the regulations. So if you're going to have it indoors, you know that you're going to have limited space, which means a limited amount of people that you're allowed in certain spaces to have proper social distancing and to ensure that you're staying as safe as possible. If you're going to have it outdoors, still a limit, 25 people. But you have more space to spread out and properly social distance. You can have little potlucks, if you will. You don't have to worry about having random people in your home. If you don't feel comfortable having people in your home, that is an option as well. So just thinking of the location of your gatherings, of course, indoor spaces pose a larger risk than outdoor spaces because of ventilation and, close quarters. You're probably going to be closer to a lot of people more if you're stuck indoors than if you can venture outdoors. And also keeping to these limitations, because there is a fine of up to $10,000. So you do not want to be paying $10,000 just for having a Thanksgiving party. Honestly, is it really worth it? How much is a turkey? So these are things that we just have to think about when we're planning our holiday season ahead. Who is it you really want to spend holiday with? And you can cut out the people you don't want to spend holiday with because the CDC essentially told you to, which brings me to another suggestion, is that the amount of time you spend together. If you're together for a longer amount of time, chances of infections increasing is higher. But if you're only together for a short window of time, so maybe you can have people come over in intervals of maybe like 2 hours. Wouldn't that be something? Just have people come in their set times for Thanksgiving. So, just again, another suggestion is just how long you're going to be spending in each other's company is also something to factor in as well. Keeping things short and sweet for Thanksgiving. Am I right? Now, the CDC also suggests you take in the behaviors of those attending. So if you have that one friend has not been practicing social distancing, refuses to wear a mask, never has hand sanitizer, rarely ever washes their hands. I hope no one has friends like that anymore, please. And you don't feel comfortable inviting them to your Thanksgiving gathering or just even socializing with them as much, now is maybe the time to have those conversations. Like, listen, hey, these are what health officials are suggesting. You can kind of use the CDC as a cop-out or an excuse, if you will. Now, I'm not saying that you should go out and blackmail your loved ones, saying, if you don't do this, you can't come to Thanksgiving. Like, it's not what I'm saying. I mean, though that might be, the message that might be coming across a little bit, but this is important because keeping yourself safe is also keeping other people safe. So just having these conversations with people whose behavior may seem a little unsafe, it's also helping them out. Like, hey, reel it in. Let's think about this. Think about what's going on around the world. Maybe this isn't the time to be jet setting across the world for fancy vacations, for fun little vacations. Maybe stay home a little bit more. Maybe don't be out socializing with a bunch of different people you don't really know. You don't really know what they're doing, where they've been, who they've been with. maybe reel that in just so that we can all be here to celebrate with each other for longer. You know, coming from a place of love. But the CDC just suggests that if you do know of people who aren't really adhering to the safety precautions, that maybe they should not be on your guest list. So there you have it. If you have someone you don't want to invite, you could say, well, sorry, my guest list is full. I can't have more than 10 people inside my house or more than 25 people at this gathering. So sorry, you can't make it. They have to understand because, you know, health and safety comes first. Number one. So, of course, you'll also need to check if any of your other guests have had symptoms too, because that's something that you will want to take into account, and something the CDC also encourages folks to do when they are planning on having these gatherings, that maybe asking them about their symptoms, if they have been exhibiting any symptoms before they come and hang out with you on Thanksgiving, or have them isolate for 2 weeks before they come out, just to ensure that, you know, the 2-week period has passed and they are completely symptom-free and they're safe to travel or safe to come and hang out and socialize with you. These are just steps you can take. I mean, some people may feel uncomfortable approaching this topic with folks because, you know, you don't want to tell people like, oh, you're doing it wrong, you are not good, it's bad what you're doing. It just doesn't, people don't really want to hear that, and that might make them not want to change their ways, if you will. But just things that you might want to be thinking about when you are planning your holiday gatherings this upcoming holiday season. It is something we are gonna have to think about at least till the end of 2020. So it needs to be in the back of your mind when you're thinking about what it is. You know, that big, you know, Thanksgiving or Christmas party you may have every single year, even maybe New Year's Eve party that you have every single year. Maybe you might have to rein it in a little bit, not having 50 people cramped in a 1-bedroom apartment for a party might not be the best idea. Just have maybe just 5 or 10 of your closest friends with you to celebrate and to enjoy the holiday season. I know it's not the funnest. We're always looking forward to holidays, especially people who want to travel to see their loved ones, people who haven't seen their loved ones in a long time, and it's the holidays that you all come together. It's sad and it's unfortunate that these are uncertain times and we're not really sure where it's going to go or what's going to happen. I mean, we've seen the up and down of the curve in recent times. So just a reminder that it's something we're going to have to keep thinking about just a little bit longer. Just hang in there, hang in there. But you can still have fun on Thanksgiving. You know, it doesn't have to be large. It doesn't have to be extravagant. Just being with people you know, love, and trust are safe and healthy is, you know, ultimately the most important things. You know, it's the small things in life. It's not how big the buffet table is or how many people are there. It's about just being able to spend time with people you really do love and care about, and just taking maybe that little pause, that little break to be thankful as well, and to take the time to be grateful for what we do have instead of focusing on, you know, what's going so wrong around us, which it's easy to do that nowadays since we're constantly bombarded with news about, even today, telling you that the cases have risen and you're limiting how many people you can interact with in certain spaces. It's not always fun news, but, you know, we're doing this, remembering that protecting ourselves is also protecting others, and that's also important to remember. Now, the CDC also encourages hosters to provide or encourage attendees to bring supplies to help one another stay safety. So that's a mask if necessary. It could also be hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. That's the regulated amount of alcohol that needs to be in the hand sanitizer for it to actually be effective. Tissues, hand wipes, all of that, you know, just the safety kit, if you will. So extra disposable masks if you can, hand sanitizer at the ready, places for people to wash their hands safely, you know, maybe not using your fancy hand towels anymore, opting for tissue. I know it's not always the best for the environment, but, you know, things that we can do to just keep the air and the space as clean and as safe as possible for everyone around you. So, and if you are planning in-person holiday gatherings for people outside of your household, consider asking guests to strictly avoid contact with people outside of their households for at least 14 days, or if you need to, maybe take a temperature upon arrival just to see and make sure with your own 2 eyes, just to see that everyone is safe and healthy and capable of being at the gathering in a safe way. So these are just some skills, some tips that you can utilize when you are planning your holiday parties or planning on attending as well, because if you're planning on attending, you too can bring your own masks, hand sanitizer, all your safety kit with you as well. Ensure that you are adhering to safety precautions as well. And also just like respecting each other at the end of the day. If you have a family member who says like, hey, I don't feel comfortable meeting in person, like respect them. It shouldn't be a reason to fight about it. Everyone's really just trying to stay safe because, you know, there's so much we still don't know about the way this virus is spreading and what the trends are. You know, we've had time with the flu to know what the flu trends are. We know that in the colder months, it's peak season for flus. But now, you know, we've seen that for the last at least 8 or 9 months, we've been dealing with this pandemic globally, not just within our own little communities. It's a global pandemic at the end of the day. So this is something that, you know, everyone in the world should be thinking about too, because holiday season is approaching for a lot of folks, and a lot of people are already, you know, planning their travels, planning what they're going to do for the holidays. So it's just something to think about when you are planning your holiday gatherings. Now, some other tips that I have curated from one particular website in an article featured on delish.com. It actually lists 8 tips on celebrating Thanksgiving safely, and I'm just going to share some of them with you. So one of the tips is to have a set menu of 5 items, desserts included. So not to have, you know, the most dishes available, having this grand buffet that maybe you would normally have with all the food open on the table for everyone to just pick what they want. Maybe limiting the amount of food, because then it's cheaper. You don't have to buy as many ingredients, spend less time cooking them, and you have less leftovers at the end of the day, and maybe you can ship off the leftovers with people as they go home. But then you're not stuck with the burden of cooking this grand meal and being burdened with the leftovers for months and months on end that you have to freeze. And then next thing you know, you have another big meal that you're making another grand buffet for, and then you're stuck with those leftovers. Nope, Delish encourages you to, you know, limit that to maybe 5, a main meal, whether that's turkey, ham, whatever you eat, beef, if you will, whatever you eat as your main thing on Thanksgiving, your 2 favorite sides, and maybe 2 desserts to round it out at the end of the meal. Just keeping it simple. We're really going for simplicity this year, right? Keeping things simple, going back to the, you know, the foundation of what makes a good gathering, if you will. It's the company and maybe the food, but now it's less food. Also, the serving style is also important. Maybe not having the buffet style that everyone can pick at. People not sharing utensils as much. Though reports have said that there haven't been any reports on COVID being transmitted through food, but it's mostly in the fact that people are sharing from the same dishes, from the same utensils, you know, serving trays, whatnot, touching the same things. Maybe instead of having that, you will have individually served dishes. So it's one person who's using their utensils and not having to share it, maybe not having the joint cooking sessions with a bunch of people who haven't been in your household or you haven't been in somewhat close contact with, who are hovering over the same stove. Maybe not such a great idea. Not having the food laying around on the table while everyone is talking over the food, not wearing masks because obviously you're eating. Just little things that you can do to ensure that everyone is staying as safe as possible, but still able to enjoy a nice Thanksgiving meal. So pre-serving the food, having individually served portions as well, maybe not doing the buffet style. Just these little things that you can do to ensure that you're staying safe, not having a fully crowded, you know, everyone's stuffed at the same table, ensuring that there's some space between people to, you know, socially distance as much as possible, as much as space indoors or even outdoors allows for. Delish also even suggests maybe just skipping the idea of cooking altogether and just ordering in, which honestly is my go-to for a lot of these long weekends and holidays, because it's just easier. You don't have to think about cooking for everyone and like slaving over the stove. You just order some takeout, and you're also supporting a small business, a local business as well. So that's always something good. So these are just some really good tips. Even planning a picnic as well, outdoors, so you don't have to have everyone come over to your home, into your space. You can just have a picnic outdoors, more space, more room for social distancing, make it a potluck where everyone brings their own food and they can eat their own food, so you don't have to worry about how other people are preparing the food in their house, whether they're washing their hands regularly or not. Ask them to bring whatever they want to eat, and you are just, you know, coming together to just celebrate and fellowship, if you will. So these are just some tips as well for how you can spend your Thanksgiving with friends and family, especially in Canada as Thanksgiving is approaching soon. Just remember, safety is number one, and that if we are keeping ourselves safe, then ultimately we're keeping others safe as well. So making sure you're in the right company of people you trust and care for, and just staying safe. I mean, it's the holidays. We want to do what we can. If you can't, you can always do a Zoom Thanksgiving dinner where everyone makes their own meals and you don't even have to worry about anything. You just tell them the date and the time and have them set up the camera and webcam and ready to go to, enjoy a meal together and just fellowship without physically having to be together. And, it's the safest option. Everyone is staying in their own homes. So those are some options on how you can have a safe and healthy Thanksgiving. If you do want more suggestions from the CDC website, it is all on the CDC website as well for you to go to check out what some other regulations or some tips on how to stay safe during holiday season is. Now, with that being said, we are coming up to the end of the show, and that in fact just concludes our show for today. So thank you so much for tuning into the Chatt Up Show again this week. Again, I want to say thank you so much to our sponsors, Coded Signature, where you can go to their website, Coded Signature with a K. Remember, it's coded with a K, signature.com, to shop the t-shirts and hats and accessories that are very Afrocentric, just like my Queen Idia hat right here. You can get yourself one as well using the discount code GBKM for 10% off your purchase at checkout, and they ship globally as well. So anywhere in the world you want to purchase, you will get your delivery and your order. Thank you for tuning in on the GBKM network. You can keep up with the GBKM network by listening live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch live on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. Follow us on Instagram at GBKMFM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. And you can follow me, your host, Elizabeth, at TIS_LIZ_O on Instagram and Twitter as well. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you at the same time, same place next week. I will chat with you then.
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alarmed. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the dark of you, you're denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alarmed. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the dark of you, you're denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alarmed. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the dark of you, you're denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Do you know who you are? What is your name?